Hi, this is Dave Toronto. The name of this podcast is Cut Through the Noise. This podcast will primarily focus on the topic of communication specific to people, businesses, management, leadership, sales, difficult conversations, and life. We want to keep the tone of this podcast in a business casual format. The podcast will be either me or myself, along with a guest or a client, having spirited conversations about the subjects I just listed. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to talk about attitudes and personalities. And the number one skill required, or the number one skill or skills that should be required for anybody that leads or manages other people, is the ability to manage attitudes and personalities. You can take your doctorates and your master's degrees and your years of experience and your tenure, and you can throw all that out the window if you don't have the ability to manage attitudes and personalities. The number one issue in most companies has to do with people and how they get along with one another. Colleague to colleague, peer to peer, manager to subordinate, etc. And one of the biggest issues that consistently surfaces inside of companies is unspoken tension. And unspoken tension is generally tied to the white elephant in the room that nobody's addressing. And if you're going to be in charge of other people, you owe it to yourself, to them, to your company, to your clients, to understand how personalities work, understand how attitudes work, and understand how to get ahead of the unspoken tension so that it doesn't poison your company. It just seems that there's an awkwardness when it comes to confronting a quirky personality, tough personality, or a bad attitude, a negative attitude, or an inconsistent attitude, whatever you want to call it. And it can take on different forms. I mean, it's easy to identify just a flagrantly bad attitude, somebody that's belligerent. Okay, it's obvious this person is a challenge to deal with. Somebody that's incredibly defensive, somebody that's incredibly opinionated and intolerant of others' opinion. That's a bad attitude. But it can also take on different forms. Inconsistency, good mood today, bad mood tomorrow. I'm talking to you today, I'm not talking to you tomorrow. Somebody that's not able to, check their garbage at the door. They come to work and whatever problems are going on outside, now they're inside. That's a challenging personality, a challenging attitude. But it takes on different forms too. Sometimes the unspoken tension is tied to the person that's just unwilling to put in extra time or go the extra mile, or who can't see things beyond their own job. That's not my job type of person. Or the person that isn't responsive. They don't answer their phones. They don't respond to emails. They're delayed in what they get. They're always late. They leave early. They're not open to change. And a lot of this happens because we allow it to happen. We ignore it. When we first see it, we hope it doesn't last, or we don't notice it. And before we know it, it becomes the norm, and we don't know how to get ahead of it. And smart managers, smart leaders with emotional intelligence see this stuff before it happens. They're willing and able to get ahead of unspoken tension before the team gets poisoned by it. An example would be, you have a hardworking team, you get 10 people on the team, and say eight of them work really, really hard. And you get two that, they kind of do their thing. They're mediocre at best. They've been there for a long time. They've always been allowed to be mediocre. They've never been challenged to do more. They're comfortable with where they're at. They're maybe mediocre is a good day, but they've been allowed to be mediocre. But if we start riding the better performers, they start looking at us saying, well, what about them? Why aren't you saying anything to them? If responsiveness is a big deal in a company, and you've got in returning phone calls and acknowledging emails and responding to texts is a big deal, and you got people that just check out, they're unavailable and they don't care, and that doesn't get addressed, it starts to take on a life of its own. Resentment starts to kick in. If we're going to put somebody in charge of other people, we need leaders and managers that are willing to confront the negative. They're willing to confront the elephant in the room, no matter what that elephant is. Sometimes, and most times, it's the leader's fault or the manager's fault or the company's fault for allowing it to exist for as long as they have. If you've inherited this type of problem, it's still on you to get ahead of it and to deal with it before it continues as a problem. What we can't do is ignore it. There are way too many leaders that ignore the problems inside their companies. They ignore the person that doesn't get along with anybody else, and they just hope it changes. They ignore the person that's not reliable because they're nice, or they ignore the person that's consistently late on a deliverable or consistently makes mistakes because they're a nice person and they don't want to hurt their feelings, or they don't want to get in an argument with the aggressive person, or they don't know how to confront the passive aggressive person, or they don't know how to deal with the fact that, this guy or this person has been here for 10 years. I've never said anything. So now how do I say it? They're uncomfortable with the perceived pushback, or they're uncomfortable with what to do if the person doesn't respond to them. So many leaders and managers avoid confronting the personality or the attitude because they've already decided in their minds what's going to come back if they do. And then they feel powerless. I've had executives say to me, well, I've said this and I've said that and I've done this and I've done that and nothing's changed. What do I do now? As if they don't have the authority to do something. What we all have to understand is that the reason that there's such an unhappy workforce really doesn't matter when you Google it, whether it was 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago. The vast majority of the US workforce, and I'm sure the global workforce, is unhappy. And for the most part, it has nothing to do with the work they're doing. It has to do with how they feel about the people around them. And when people don't communicate openly and honestly, it's because they feel like it won't matter if they do. Uh, if they feel like they can't or they shouldn't. Some people don't say anything. They don't address problems because they're afraid it's going to cost them their job. But smart people do deal with that stuff because they understand the consequences of not dealing with it. If you're a leader and you're responsible for enabling or allowing or ignoring or tolerating a bad attitude or a bad personality or an unspoken tension, a white elephant, then you owe it to yourself, to that person, and to that team and to your company to do something about it and say something about it. To let it fester will poison everybody. To let it fester will cost you your best people. You will lose the credibility with your best people. You'll lose their respect. You'll all of a sudden have no ideas coming at you. You'll have your better people cutting corners, resigning, not putting in the extra work because they'll start to feel like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because not everybody's held to the same standards. Or we let so and so do that because that's the way he's been for years. Or we let so and so do that because they have a lot of problems outside of work. Or we let so and so do that because they're just not comfortable growing. We've got to create an environment that allows people to grow, that encourages people to grow just a little bit each day. But what we can't do is create environments that enable complacency, that develop people to the point where they become obsolete. The more we allow people not to grow, the more we don't confront a bad attitude, the more we don't confront a challenging personality, the more we diminish the value of that person. We're not giving them a chance to grow because we're afraid of the reaction, or we don't want to hurt their feelings. And we got to stop doing that because it doesn't have to be that end result. Smart, emotionally intelligent leaders get ahead of problems. In some situations, getting ahead of the problem can be incredibly awkward. You might be managing somebody else's family member, or you might have inherited a team and a person on that team is good friends with the boss, or this person was a peer and now you're the boss. There's all different reasons that can cause discomfort. But that doesn't change the fact that we've got to get ahead of these conversations. We've got to be willing to have them. We've got to be willing to call out the unspoken tension in our companies, because if we don't, no one else will. That's what creates a negative undercurrent. That's what creates turnover. That's what creates a lack of engagement. And that's what makes it harder to hire good people. When we don't confront the challenging personalities or the negative attitudes or the unspoken tension, and then we try to bring new people into the company and we just hope they don't notice it. Well, you know what? We're setting them up to become the same way. We're basically telling them, hey, we're not willing to deal with our problems. I'm hoping that you can ignore them too. Ain't going to work. So, as far as I'm concerned, as we consider our existing leadership teams, and that's from CEO down, and we consider the new managers or leaders that we're looking to promote or hire into our organization, the number one skill that we should make non-negotiable are the skills to manage personalities, the skills to manage attitudes, and the skills to call out and address the unspoken tension that may exist inside the organization. Hope this was helpful. Thanks again for listening. For more information about JCE, check us out online at jcegrp.com or follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. If there are topics that you'd like to hear us discuss in the future, we would certainly love to hear from you. Have a great day.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.